add-on instead of input. The gap begins to close. So let's simplify things. Let's close the gap with input.
All right, guys. Welcome to the usual Sunday Mac Forum video chat. Probably keep it kind of short this week. We are running. We'll get started here in just a second. All right, welcome aboard, guys. Welcome to the usual Sunday video chat. We'll try to keep things probably a little short this week, but did want to try to push one out today so that everybody that's been watching recently, and I do appreciate it, that you'll keep an eye out for these. And as the summer months approach, I'll be trying to do a few more things, liven things up a little bit. Not a lot of specific things on the agenda tonight. Do want to keep you posted about a couple of things that I've noticed, and we'll hit a few forum things in general, but nothing major for the night. Hopefully, one of the things that I hope to do a little bit this summer, got a couple of projects in mind that I'm going to be using the Mac with over the summer. I could do this stuff in Windows. I refuse to. Sorry. So unless the MacBook Pro blows up in the next couple of months, I'll be doing these projects on a Mac, on my Mac, and we'll be keeping you posted about some tips for how to tackle some of these kinds of projects. And probably you'll see more than a few posts in the forum asking for advice about some of these projects. I want to get back to this summer, maybe focusing a little bit on something that I did when I was writing about this particular Macintosh. I did a series of articles once where we discussed things that you could do with your Mac. Video packages that you could put together, video clips that you could distribute, and yes, these things could be done with the PC running Windows, but the focus of that particular magazine was Macintosh, obviously, and we wanted to focus on the things that you can do with the Mac. I may spend some time this summer talking once again about some of the things that you can do with a Mac using just the software that came with the computer. One of our members, you'll excuse me if I don't remember who, posted, this just came to me, posted a link asking about the use of TextEdit, which is the word processor that comes standard on every Mac. Back in the old days, when I first got on the Mac, it was referred to, its predecessor was referred to as SimpleText. The SimpleText was it's about as basic a word processor as you could get. The closest analogy I can think of was WordPad for Windows, to give you an idea. I know that comparison is not 100% dead on, but it will give our new switchers an idea of what they're looking for. For the longest time, I did not use TextEdit. I had Microsoft Word on my machine. I also had a couple of other word processors, so I tended to use full-fledged word processors. But there were times when I found that Notes did not exist in its current form at that time. There was a sticky note function, but there was a lot of time when I needed a little bit more than a sticky note, but I didn't need to launch a full-blown word processor such as Microsoft Word. Wanted something with a small footprint, just because I just need to. In a lot of cases, it was to make a note about something that I was working on. I'm going through my iTunes library list, looking for stuff, and I need to make a list of things that I haven't put in there yet or things that I need to reload. Speaking of which, we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's another horror story. And I found that TextEdit was a good alternative, had become a good alternative. And then by the time I wrote the article that I referenced in that thread, TextEdit could do a number of things that made it a little more viable as a alternative. It is not, and I will repeat this, it is not a replacement for a full-blown word processor. Okay? If you need something like Microsoft Word, Mariner Write, or even Apple's Pages, TextEdit is not the program to use as an alternative. But it is good for cranking out little notes, one-page notes, summaries of things. It's very, very good for things like that that don't require a full-blown word processor. I also will keep it open sometimes if I have several programs up and running, and I know that launching a full-blown word processor may slow things down a little bit. I'll open TextEdit, type whatever I need to type in there, and then polish it up in whatever word processor I'm using. One of the things that you can do to make TextEdit more viable as a word processing alternative. This did not this idea did not originate with me. I read it somewhere else on the internet and tried it. It works well. I thought it was a good idea. If you have a certain set of margins and settings that you almost always use, and you don't want to have to keep going back to Word to TextEdit and duplicating those settings over and over and over, create a template that you can use. It's essentially creating a base document that you can use. And the easiest way to do that will be to take a full-fledged word processor. You can do it on your machine if you've got a full-fledged word processor on there, or you can do it on someone else's machine. The key thing is set your margins, font size, any of that nature, to the way you want your base document to start. Then take that document and save it in rich text format. Okay, then you're going to take that document and put it somewhere on your system where you can find it easily. Name it something like basic document or document template. Name it something that's going to tell you what it is. And when you want to launch, you may want to put an alias in the doc. Drag, open it up, pin an alias to the doc. And then that way, when you need to open TextEdit and be sure what your environment is, click on that basic document and it'll open up. Now you do have to be sure, as soon as that document opens, save it with a different name so that your changes that you're going to make, the content that you're going to add, don't overwrite your basic document. You're going to want to be sure that you do that. That's going to be a good approach to take. It's one of those things that you need to be sure that you do if you're going to use TextEdit effectively and not be frustrated by having to constantly be reloading those same set of settings. TextEdit will open. There's a lot of Microsoft Word documents that open fine in TextEdit. It does not handle some complicated formatting, and I'm not sure that it would handle really, really large documents very well. But most Word documents, if they're not overly formatted, will open in TextEdit reasonably well. So that's something to keep in mind. And it's yet another example of something that your Mac can do with software that came right out of the box. You don't have to worry about, oh, I need this or I need that. Of course, there are always other alternatives like Pages, the LibreOffice. There are a ton of other alternatives out there. So look around. ask a few questions, find the thing that works best for you. But if you're just knocking off a few quick notes here and there, and you need something that's got a small footprint, TextEdit's a good alternative. That's something that has kind of stuck in my mind recently, the idea of using what you have to get done what you need. And it's not that I have anything against third-party software, but I think many times we as users, and I know I've been guilty of this before in the past, will purchase something thinking, okay, I need a piece of software that does this, only to discover that it could have been done with a piece of software that we already own. The example that I have given to a couple of my friends is I was working on a photo restoration a while back, and I had done the bulk of the work in Photoshop, excuse me, and I think it was CS3 or something like that. Yes, I am that far back in updating Photoshop, mainly because I don't use Photoshop that often. But anyway, I had the photo close to the way I wanted it. Nothing spectacular. I just wanted to clean up the image. I had it close to the way I wanted, but I'm not a Photoshop genius, and I just couldn't get things filtered out the way I wanted it. Every time I made a move on it, it seemed like I overshot or undershot something. I didn't get quite the look I was looking for. And one day I'm working on one of those articles for about this particular Macintosh. I'm looking at things you can do with Preview, and I opened up this photo that I had been working on just to get a look at it. I wanted to see how quickly it would load that photo compared to loading in other programs. And it loaded up pretty quickly. It was a JPEG image. It loaded pretty quickly. And I started fiddling around. I had read something about the color in Preview, and I started fiddling around with the color settings just for the heck of it. And yes, I made a copy of the file before I started messing with it. And started fiddling around with some of the color settings. And lo and behold, in a relatively short amount of time, had made the adjustment that I was having trouble making in Photoshop. Now, does it mean that Photoshop is a bad program for doing that? No. That's what Photoshop's made its bones, so to speak, doing. But in a matter of a few minutes, I could do in Preview something that I had been trying to do for quite some time in Photoshop. Someone familiar with Photoshop could have probably done it in the same time or less. It's just that for that particular function, Preview did what I needed to do and did it in a way that my brain understood. So that's kind of what got me on this kick about using the software that you have on the machine, looking for alternatives. Sometimes the alternative is freeware or shareware. I have a couple of programs that I've used for years that started as shareware. One of my favorite audio applications is shareware, and I've used it for years, and the developer has been very good about keeping up with OS changes and the like, and I use it. I understand the way it works. It's overkill for what I need to do, but it gets the job done. I personally prefer it to some of the other things out there. I use Amadeus Pro for a lot of the things that I need to do. Can you do it with other software? Yes. So find the things that you like to use and get to know them well before you move on to other things. Every once in a while you're going to find something that is new that you really need or that really works better than whatever has been out there before. That's fine. But have a look at what you've got before you start going in search of something else. As I mentioned to you last week, I'm in the process of trying to resurrect my iTunes library. because the NAS drive that I had appears to have died. I still have not managed to get the hard drive out of that unit. That's proving to be a pain. But I have started. I'm hoping that I will be able to remove the drive and resurrect my library that way. But in the meantime, I have started re-downloading some of the things that were purchased through the iTunes Store. That'll go quite a ways toward resurrecting the library. It will not change loading some of the things that I did not purchase from iTunes, from the iTunes Store. I may go back and use iTunes Match to try to match some of the things that I had loaded in the library off of my CD collection. And I have some other things I'm going to have to reload, some shows that I purchased through iTunes and the like. All in all, it's going to be a nightmare of a project, but I am glad that you can, using the iTunes Store, go back in and re-download things. There are some things I am going to have to find in my backup. I had deleted the most recent backup because it was having a problem loading from there. I had deleted it to try to clear and do a full backup again, to clear enough space and do a full backup. And before I could get the full backup completed, the NAS drive went down. So my advice to you is, even when you know that your backup is not 100% complete, don't get rid of that backup until you know you've got one. It would be a ton easier to resurrect this if I had the previous backup, which was only missing a couple of gig of information. So it would have been much easier had I kept that in place. The biggest problem was I did not have enough hard drive space to keep that backup in place and go ahead and do another full backup. And what I should have done is just gone out and purchased another drive for that purpose, but I didn't. You know, live and learn. So guys, that's as a word of warning to you, don't delete your old backup before you have created a new one. That goes for system backups as well. I hope that you are using, you know, we got a post today from someone wondering what to use for backup. Of course, Time Machine is a viable alternative for a lot of things. But if you're not using Time Machine, find something. Set up a backup strategy, preferably something that has some degree of redundancy to it. If you have one backup, and the backup is in the same place that your computer is in, you're at a point where you've basically got essentially one fail point. You know, and also keep in mind, every once in a while someone will ask, is it okay if I format my drive and use part of the drive for backup purposes? You know, for Time Machine. The other part's going to be my boot drive, and part of it's going to be Time Machine. Time Machine will let you do that to a certain extent if the drive is formatted. You can do, you know, and partition. You can do that. I don't recommend it because you've got, let's say that you partition your boot drive and you've got 100 gigabyte of space left for Time Machine. And you put Time Machine on that partition, on that 100 gigabyte partition. Here's the problem. If the drive itself, not the directory structure, but the mechanics, the hardware itself, goes down, in one fell swoop, you lose your primary information plus your backup. You don't ever want to be in that kind of situation. So I don't recommend doing it. Have your backups on some. If you're going to use network storage, have another backup somewhere else. Because right now I've got my iTunes library is on this network drive that I can't access. the management software that is used to be accessed by a web interface keeps telling me that there is nothing being shared, despite the fact that I had a rather large iTunes library on shared folder. So, and my original thought would be to take the drive out of the casing, because now you're not even seeing it at all, really. So it's as if the drive doesn't exist. I've got nothing to lose by trying to take the hard drive out of the case and see if I can resurrect it that way. But the case is turning out to be a colossal pain to get into. So I may or may not be able to access it at all. So learn from my mistakes. Always make sure that you have a backup. It's going to take me a while to get things back to a point where I'm comfortable with them. Fortunately for me, I had not deleted anything from the iTunes library list, and so I had that list. I was able to save it off as a PDF so that I know what was in the library. And by the way, if you go to print, if you go to iTunes and you're looking for a function to print things out, if you have a large library, iTunes will tell you that the printout runs to hundreds of pages. In my case, it was 150-something pages because of the way it lays things out, or more. And but be aware that buried in the print dialog box, in other words, after you click print, buried there, what pops up next will be the iTunes print box, the standard OS X print box. So you do have the option of going and printing it out as a PDF, which is the equivalent of exporting it as a PDF for all practical purposes. And that way you can look through the list without having to print out 100+ pages of paper and wasting 100+ pages worth of ink and the like. So keep that in mind. The option is a little bit buried in terms of how to get to it. I thought originally, because of the way the iTunes library is because of the way the print dialog is laid out, that you were going to get, when you hit print, you weren't going to get the option to say that it's PDF. And you do. Be aware of that. I think someone posted about that recently in the forum. And that's what gave me the idea to go looking for it. And one of our members pointed out that in the dialogue. It's not exactly a 100% standard installation because it does look like you don't see that print to PDF button right where you're expecting it, and in other dialog boxes it's right there. iTunes is just a little bit different. I can't tell you what it is that's tripping me up, but it does on occasion trip people up. Lots of things that iTunes does are intuitive, but to me that's not one of them. And I'm kind of glad that you can learn something from just about anybody that posted in the forum. I never really thought of using iTunes to save the library that way. Haven't really had that problem. I've had to resurrect my iTunes library before because of other issues, but I've always known what was in the library. This is the first time I've had this big a problem with the library and not really had a full listing of what was there. So do keep that in mind as you go about your activities. We're going to be, I'll keep you posted on that, and if I have any ideas or comments about what will make that process easier, I'll let you know. Of course, there are a lot of things out there that can help with that. A couple of other things I want to be sure that I mention. We're hitting the summer, which means that all kinds of Apple-related speculation will be out. What's going to be announced at WWDC. Worldwide Developer Conference, for those of you that don't keep track of the acronyms, and what's going to come, you know, in terms of the operating system, what's going to come in terms of hardware, software. You're going to see tons of reports here and there, everybody thinking that they know what's going to come, and quite frequently, we don't. It's just mere speculation. It should be interesting to see what comes out. It usually is for me. I can recall the last couple of years being sitting at the computer during the keynote, having a chat with a friend of mine in Modesto, and talking about what's coming up, what's going to happen next. What's, you know, here's this thing that just got announced in the keynote. Is this good? Is this bad? Do we like it? Do we not like it? Not everything that's going to be new from Apple comes out during the developer conference, but there's usually something interesting that comes out of it. Sometimes products will be available almost immediately after the developer conference. Sometimes, as in like last year, the operating system update from Mavericks to go from Mountain Lion to Mavericks was announced, but it didn't become available until a little bit later. Sometimes something is announced and is available the same day or the same week. It just kind of depends on what it is and what Apple's got in the plans. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure it'll be interesting. I'm sure there will be numerous threads on the forum once that happens, talking about what was announced, what wasn't announced, what people wish would have been announced, things of that nature. It's always fun. No, we as forum members do not have any inside information. Anything that I could tell you that I'm expecting would be sheer speculation. And to be honest with you, I haven't really thought about it yet in terms of what I expect. Is it entirely possible that they will announce something in regards to what the next operating system will be? Sure. But I don't know that for sure, and I'm not necessarily expecting that. Anything's possible. Is it possible they're going to make some hardware announcements? Yeah. And probably will. There's usually some kind of hardware announcement. Sometimes major, sometimes minor. But we don't know for sure. We won't know until the day of, basically. So keep that in mind. That's something to keep you salivating over for the next month. Also, want to be sure that I point out to you one of the other things that you can keep an eye out on your Mac for is sometimes when there are OS revisions, you don't hear about all of the changes that are made. You know, something will say, you know, the press release will say 150 new features. And you look at it and you can't see, well, how they come up with 150? And then you notice that some of the feature changes and enhancements are buried in things that you don't use or don't use to their fullest potential. For example, there have been some changes to AppleScript recently, the scripting language that comes with every OS 10 release. If I'm not mistaken, and you have some scripting skill, you can make use of the notification center in your Apple scripts. I'm getting back into experimenting with AppleScript, but my experience with AppleScript is pretty much limited to really basic stuff, modifying some content that scripts that others have made. I had one, for example, to silently mount my iTunes library drive, and by silent mounting I mean that the drive would pop up before iTunes launched, but it would not open a Finder window. Normally, if you go and search your network and you find your, say, if you've got a NAS or something, you just mount it on the through the Finder, it opens with the Finder window open. I didn't really need that. I didn't need to see the folder with the library. I just needed iTunes to be able to see it when it opened. So by looking at some code that others had worked on, I was able to get something that mounted the drive silently. It wasn't difficult, but it did prove to be a bigger pain than I expected. I don't advocate cutting and pasting somebody else's code into your system unless you understand what it does. The code that I looked at, I kind of had worked with a little bit before, so I kind of knew what it did and what it didn't do. Anytime you read a script that somebody's gotten and you modify it, if you know somebody that codes, have them look at it. Don't just paste code in and not have a good understanding of what it does. I am not saying that the person who posted the code would deliberately do something to harm your system. What I am saying is this: when you start pasting somebody else's code into your system, if the code is poorly written or there's something else wrong, you have now brought that problem into your system, and you may inadvertently do damage that would be difficult to take care of. This leads back to the earlier comment I made about having a backup, and preferably some degree of redundancy in your backups. If you've got a backup of your data, then if you make errors like that, it's a little bit easier to recover from. I personally think it's a good idea to have a backup of your operating system, either as a quote-unquote clone, which reminds me I've got to clone my operating system again, or as a time machine backup of your system files. But keep in mind that a time machine backup of your OS files is not directly bootable. In other words, let's say that you let Time Machine copy all your system files, and tomorrow your hard drive goes dead. You can't boot from that Time Machine backup and restore everything unless you've made some preparations for that ahead of time. You can boot and install the basic OS. You can go in and install the basic OS, go through that way, and then load Time Machine. My preferred method for doing this is to use a clone. I like the idea of cloning because if you keep that clone current, in the event of a disaster, you can get back up and running and solve the issue later. Some of you may know from an article that I wrote for the blog some time ago that I've had that happen before. I had a hard drive fail in my old Mac Pro. The boot drive failed. Happened one evening right after work. I was working on something. I needed my computer. So what I was able to do is boot off of a clone on an external drive. I ran off of that external drive for about 3 days or 4 days until I had an opportunity to do some more troubleshooting. Determined that it was a bad drive, and Apple, because it was under Apple Care at the time, Apple sent me a replacement drive, and I was able to copy things. Now, in terms of actual downtime, I lost maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes of actual time, and that was the time spent finding the drive and booting from the clone. I could have spent more time, and I did lose a little more time that night trying to figure out the problem, figure out whether the drive was actually dead. But my computer was up and running at that time. In other words, the computer was useful. The drive was not. The time that I spent was time checking cable connections and putting it into a drive case to be sure that it wasn't a failing hard drive cable or something of that nature. So yeah, I spent more time troubleshooting it, but in that whole time, the computer itself was up and functional. In fact, I had the computer grinding on a couple of files while I was troubleshooting some things with the drive. You can't do that without having a bootable copy somewhere. With the current versions of the OS being downloadable, you're stuck with, if you're lucky, you'll be able to boot to the recovery partition, but if not, you're going to end up re-downloading the OS. And that, even with a good high-speed connection, is a time-consuming process. So make sure that you've got some kind of bootable USB stick, or better yet, a clone of your hard drive. There's some good software out there that will clone your hard drive. The two that I am most familiar with are SuperDuper and Carbon Copy Cloner. There are others. Find one that works well. I think you'll find those two are the ones that many of our forum members recommend. My suggestion to you is find one that works well and use it. Set yourself up a strategy, a regular strategy to back up regularly, to clone the hard drive regularly. And then once you've got a good clone of the operating system, you can let Time Machine do its work with the rest of your data. Because then you can boot from the clone and use Time Machine to, because now you've got access to disk utility and everything like that. Plus, you have Time Machine to reload your data. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. I notice we're just about past the 35-minute mark here on the show. That's good. Won't run too much longer. I don't want to bore you to death. And hopefully, now that we're approaching summer, my cohorts will be back next week or shortly thereafter. I'm also going to try for the summer to get a few other members involved and perhaps get some of our European contingent. We've got some guys in the European segment and Aussies that have proven to be invaluable as far as troubleshooting goes. I'd like to get them on the show once in a while, kind of share some of their experiences with you, and perhaps get one or two of our newer members in. It's always nice to see some new members come into the forum. We had a couple of people come in new in the last few days. Welcome aboard, guys. I'm sure you'll be becoming valuable contributors to the forum in no time. As some of you know, Rad Dave, who has been on the show with me a couple of times, he's relatively new to Macs in a short amount of time, and he's rapidly becoming someone whose troubleshooting advice is taken very seriously, with good reason. And I hope that those of you who are new to the forum will find something useful there. If you don't find an answer to your question, go ahead and post a question. You'll find that there are a number of questions in the Switzer forum area that have probably been answered. But if you can't find it, or you don't stumble on an answer and your situation is different from that what you're seeing posted, let us know. Most of our members try to be very helpful and do it with a positive attitude. As is evidenced by, you'll notice that several of our members have a moniker MOTM, either because they are currently member of the month or have been in the past. That generally goes to a member who is making a habit of being invaluable, if you will, for lack of a better word, toward helping generate the kind of positive forum atmosphere that we want. We don't generally close a lot of threads except for a couple of things related to violations of our community rules. Check those out if you're new. I can tell you the couple things that we don't have a lot of tolerance for is spamming, discussions of pirating software, and copyright violations, that like, and also the Hackintosh area. Will get shut down pretty quickly because being a U.S. forum, we are, of course, bound in the U.S. as Mac users by U.S. copyright law. So you're not going to find forum members encouraging you to violate the law. They point out to you that the copyright law varies slightly from country to country, and it does. That's a perfectly legit thing to point out. But when it comes to things like pirating software and the like, you're not going to find a lot of tolerance for discussion of that on the forum. Those kinds of threads tend to get locked double quick. And as far as the next few weeks go, like I say, I'm going to be doing some photo-related things the next couple weeks. So I'll be asking some of our photography gurus for some help there, some advice on how to go about doing a particular project. And I'll try to keep you posted about how that goes. Try to get back to putting together a rundown of future shows. I didn't do a rundown tonight, posted because, to be honest with you, up until a few minutes before the show went on the air, I wasn't quite sure I was going to be able to make it tonight. This should be the last time that happens for a while unless something goes wrong. But I hope that you've enjoyed this. We'll keep it relatively short, as you know. This particular Sunday is part of the long Memorial Day weekend here in the United States, where we honor those veterans who have given their life in defense of the country. We want to give a quick salute to them and their families, and I know that in other countries you have similar days, not necessarily this weekend. They're scattered different times of the year. I do want to give a shout out to those guys and their families. It's a tremendous sacrifice that they have made. Because of that, we have the freedom to do some of the things that we're able to do. We'll let them know that we appreciate that. And that really pretty much is going to do it for this Sunday. We'll be looking forward to being here next week. Probably have sometime early in the week or midweek. I'll probably have a rundown of some topics that we'll be talking about in the next show. Hopefully Van and Rad Dave will be able to join us next week. May even have a few surprise guests if I can line things up there. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this Sunday chat, and I'll see you next Sunday. Good night, and enjoy the rest of your evening.